listeners.
Welcome to episode 65 of Check This Out podcast for kids. We are back with another episode in our series on ponderings about history. If you're just catching up, some of our most recent ponderings have been about things like what was the bubonic plague and what caused the Boston Tea Party.
But we've also talked about lots of other things on the podcast too.
You're right, Cece. Can you give us some examples?
Well, we did a series on famous Americans like Ben Franklin and Rosa Parks.
Those were good ones. And we did a series of episodes on women who changed the world.
Like Malala Yousafzai, Ruby Bridges.
I also like the ones about Sacagawea and Anne Frank from the Women Who Changed the World series. And we've discussed the 7 natural wonders of the world, done a series on artists and musicians from history.
Like the Beatles and Frida Kahlo and Taylor Swift.
Yes. So listeners, if you're just joining us for the first time, as we get into our most recent series on ponderings, welcome. We're happy you're here, and we're excited to explore our most recent pondering.
What was life like on the Oregon Trail?
Now, I think it's important to be honest with our listeners, Cece.
Okay.
I'm a millennial, so even though I was born a long time after the Oregon Trail happened,
The Oregon Trail was active from the early 1840s until 1869.
I did in fact grow up playing a computer game that helped me experience what life was like on the Oregon Trail.
What was the game called, Mama?
The Oregon Trail. Creative name, I know, but it was this awesome computer game that everyone who is my age...
Old.
Rude. Lots of people who are my age played this game growing up, and a lot of us played it in school, and it helped us learn about what life was like on the Oregon Trail.
But that was a game.
And this is the real Oregon Trail we're talking about today. So we have a pondering to unpack. What was life like on the Oregon Trail? In the game, things would happen, like your horse getting hurt, or people getting sick with a disease called dysentery, or you'd have to forge a river or hunt for food.
Fording a river is another way of saying crossing a river.
Yeah, so for the parents listening along with their kiddos who played this game, we might have ideas about what life was like on the Oregon Trail, but the quick answer is this.
Life was hard on the Oregon Trail.
Should we get into why, Cece?
Yeah, check this out.
The Oregon Trail was a 2,000-mile route or path from a town in Missouri called Independence. People would take the Oregon Trail all across the country, from Independence, Missouri, to a place called Oregon City, which is near present-day Portland, Oregon. The Oregon Trail served as the main path for people who wanted to head west in the United States. The Oregon Trail was active during the 19th century, from the early 1840s through the late 1860s.
How many people traveled on the Oregon Trail?
Great question, Cece. I actually want to see if our listeners can guess how many people used the Oregon Trail to travel west, while it was mainly active from that period of the 1840s to the 1860s. Listeners, see if you can take a guess. Was it A, 1.2 million people who used the Oregon Trail, B, 800,000 people, C, 350,000 people, or D, 150,000 people?
If you guess C, you're right.
Yes, ma'am. Between 300 to 400,000 people are estimated to have used the Oregon Trail to travel west across the United States in the 19th century.
Why did people move west, Mama?
During the 1800s, there was this idea in the United States called manifest destiny. As the United States grew and expanded in the 1800s, a lot of Americans were inspired by this idea of manifest destiny. They basically believed that the United States had a duty to stretch westward all the way to the Pacific Ocean and even beyond. The idea of manifest destiny was that the nation would spread Christian and democratic ideals across the North American continent, and the entire continent from coast to coast would be the United States.
Keep in mind today the United States has 50 states plus Washington, D.C., and 14 territories.
But back in 1840, when the Oregon Trail got started, there were only 26 states in the United States. The West had really been unexplored, and it was still inhabited by the native peoples who had been living there for generations. Now, listeners, you may remember from another episode, we talked about something called the Louisiana Purchase that happened in 1803.
I remember a little, but remind me.
All good, Cece. The Louisiana Purchase was when the United States bought the rights to the western half of the Mississippi River Basin from France in 1803. Before that, America's western border only went as far as the Mississippi River.
This was a big deal.
The biggest land deal ever, in fact. The deal of the Louisiana Purchase granted the United States the sole authority to obtain the land from its indigenous native inhabitants, either by contract or by conquest. The total price of the Louisiana Purchase was around $27 million at the time. But it was a big deal because it doubled the size of the United States, and it really opened up the curiosity about exploring the West and the potential for people to move west. Sadly, this also opened up a lot of violence and aggression against the native peoples who had been living in this part of the continent for thousands of years.
Okay, but so why did people want to move west?
I guess I didn't answer that, huh? Well, there were lots of reasons why people wanted to go west. Like I always say with history, the answer is rarely ever simple. But if you boil it down to one theme, I'd say it was this. Mainly people wanted to go in search of new opportunities and riches. There were reports from scouting missions that the land in Oregon and California were fertile and plentiful, and people moved in search of new opportunities, land and wealth.
Plus, wasn't there gold out there?
Good memory, Cece. In 1848, the California Gold Rush happened, and people went in big groups to the west. The Oregon Trail could also get people to California if they wanted to end up there instead of Oregon. But people had been traveling on the Oregon Trail and using it even before gold was found in California.
How did they discover the trail?
Well, it wasn't really discovered. Fur trappers, religious missionaries, and explorers kind of created and crafted the Oregon Trail over time. They often used established Native American trails and pieced these together to create what would become the Oregon Trail.
Check this out.
Before the Oregon Trail existed, the only way to get all the way over to the western continent was to take a ship all the way around the southernmost tip of South America. Yeah, people knew that they needed an overland route to get west.
Getting west by ship took over a year.
Yeah, so the ability for people to travel across the land instead of on ship to get to the west was a big deal. Now, listeners, if you listened to our episode on Sacagawea, you may remember hearing about the expedition of Lewis and Clark. Lewis and Clark's expedition in 1803 was part of the United States government's plan to open the Oregon Country and the Willamette Valley to settlement. Sacagawea helped them navigate the journey. The problem is that the trail that was used by this party of Lewis and Clark was really challenging, and it wouldn't work for families who were traveling by wagon and carrying all their things. They knew an easier trail was needed.
In 1836, the first covered wagons were used.
A missionary party headed by Marcus and Narcissa Whitman set out to reach the Willamette Valley. Though the Whitmans were forced to abandon their wagons 200 miles short of Oregon, they proved that families could go west by wheeled travel. In the spring of 1843, a wagon train of nearly 1,000 people organized at Independence, Missouri, with plans to reach Oregon country. Amidst an overwhelming chorus of people who said they couldn't do it, the so-called Great Migration made it safely to Oregon. What was really important to their success was that they used something called the South Pass. And it was a 12-mile wide valley that was virtually the only place between the plains and Oregon where wagons could cross through the Rocky Mountains.
Check this out.
In the winter of 1842 to 1843, Marcus Whitman made the 3,000-mile journey back east on horseback. His goal was to convince his sponsors to continue to support the trips west. He even met with officials in Washington, D.C. about settlement in Oregon country. Those discussions became a major factor in convincing Easterners to move west and settle the land.
Now we know how the Oregon Trail came to be and why the settlers needed it.
But it is time to answer our pondering. What was life like on the Oregon Trail? Any guesses, Cece?
So when the people died, they would usually throw them out of the wagon, and then they would bury them, and all the bumps that we go over, those are people that got digged in the Oregon Trail.
So yeah, a lot of people did die on the Oregon Trail, which we are going to talk about. But anything else about what you think life was like on the Oregon Trail? Do you think it was easy or hard?
It was really hard because people got sick and died.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it more. So let's just put it this way. Using the Oregon Trail and moving west was not for the faint of heart. Remember, from Independence, Missouri, this was a 2,000-mile journey, and a lot of people did the entire thing on foot, just walking, because riding in the wagons was really bumpy and uncomfortable. So picture things like blistered feet, choking dust, swarming insects. These were real things that the immigrants dealt with.
It took people months to travel the Oregon Trail.
Yeah, you're right. It generally took about 4 to 6 months, with people covering around 10 to 20 miles a day. Again, most of them were on foot. One of the main complaints of people who took the Oregon Trail were how slowly it moved. When you ran into a river that you had to forge or cross, it could really slow things down. Now remember, Independence, Missouri was where the Oregon Trail started, but people still had to get to Independence, Missouri first. So oftentimes people were taking trains to get to Independence, Missouri to then start their wagon journey out to Oregon.
And this was the last outpost where pioneers could stock up.
So here's a typical day in the life of a pioneer traveling west on the Oregon Trail. Pioneers followed rivers, averaging close to 20 miles a day. Their covered wagons rolled across dry plains.
Check this out.
Pioneers often drove past furniture that had been thrown away by previous travelers. This happened, things were tossed out to lighten the wagon's load. Pioneers from the east were also used to forests and farmlands of the populated eastern United States. They often found walking through the wide open plains shocking. Men tended to manage the covered wagons and the livestock. Women mostly walked alongside the wagons and took care of the chores.
If you're thinking about a day on the Oregon Trail, there were lots of sounds and smells too.
Yeah, the wagon wheels were loud. People would listen to the wagon wheels rumbling along. Plus, they were mixed with the wind, bird calls, and the hum of bugs like bees and locusts. Men carried firearms and even had whips to scare rattlesnakes on the path.
Snakes crept into beds at night too.
Oh, how freaky would that be to wake up with a snake in your bed? Ooh! But other normal things in the day in the life of the Oregon Trail included things like having to reshoe a horse, or repairing a broken wagon axle or wheel, or tending to sick or injured animals or people. Wagon wheels needed a lot of work and regular greasing to make sure that the wagons could move along the trail.
Men would hunt for food along the trail.
Yeah, buffalo meat was very popular. A lot of the pioneers ate buffalo meat. And women still had to do lots of household chores, but just on the road. So women would do things like bake bread, make butter, milk cows, do laundry, but it was all on the road.
All this sounds hard, but cool.
Well, we haven't even gotten to some of the hardest parts yet, like weather or sickness. Keep in mind, people were on the Oregon Trail for months. Generally, it took people about 4 to 6 months, and they were exposed to the elements that whole time. They would have to deal with rainstorms, hailstorms, and crazy winds.
Plus, there was nowhere to hide from bugs.
Yeah, they dealt with things like mosquitoes and locusts. But maybe the scariest thing was disease. And a big disease that got people sick and killed them on the Oregon Trail was cholera, which is a sickness that comes from infected water.
Well, I remember that Kirsten's friend got cholera from the water and she died.
Yeah. In the American Girl books about Kirsten, her friend gets sick from bad water and gets cholera and dies. Good memory, Cece.
Did the native people get angry these people were in their land?
It's hard to say what the Native Americans were thinking, Cece, but we do know that only around 4% of pioneers who died on the trail died from fighting Native Americans. Now, some tribe members did steal horses or cattle, but more often they served as helpful guides and trading partners.
That is cool.
Yeah, the Oregon Trail was hard work, it was dangerous, and it was not for the weak. Plus, there were risks everywhere: disease, weather conditions, trying to manage supplies, and making sure you don't get trampled by a wagon or a horse. By the mid-1880s, the last major parts of the Transcontinental Railroad network had been finished.
After trains and wagons traveled, pretty much stopped.
Yeah, once the train existed that took folks all the way west, people didn't have to do this grueling months-long walk. It became a quick journey of only a few days riding on a train. On trains, the travelers were safe from things like mosquitoes and snakes and storms. But the Oregon Trail's impact remained as people continued to travel west in the decades after the Oregon Trail stopped being used by covered wagons. Now, as we wrap up our episode today, as always, we have a poem for you to remind you of everything we learned about the Oregon Trail. Here we go. As wagons creaked, pioneers set a course, driven by manifest destiny's force. From the 1840s through 1860s, the dust did rise, a result of wagon wheels beneath vast and open skies. Through rivers wide and mountains high, pioneers traveled west as months went by. For 2,000 miles, with cattle and children near, each day was tough yet filled with cheer. The risks were great and the rewards were many. The Oregon Trail cost a pretty penny. 20 miles a day on steed or on foot, not all survived cholera's brute. Bugs, weather, snakes, and dust, push through all these the pioneers must. A flooded river, a broken wheel, could bring the journey all to heel. But they pushed on and headed west. The legend of the Oregon Trail stands the test. Here at the Check This Out podcast, we know there's a lot of information and it can be overwhelming to find accurate information online. This podcast is a tool for you to help you do something called citing your sources. As you get older and do projects for school, you'll learn that certain types of websites or information sources aren't verified or have evidence and documentation to back them up. On Check This Out, we use verified sources to build the stories you hear about. Verified sources are the materials or information that have been confirmed for accuracy and credibility through an evaluation process. Our sources for this week's episode are Encyclopedia Britannica, History.com, the National Park Service, and more. Make sure to join us again for next week's episode because we are continuing to explore other ponderings.
Thanks again for listening. See you next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.
Bye.
Bye.